Welcome back to another episode of What's Up, Prof. Hello, Walter. Long time no see.
Hello, Martin.
A whole week.
Yes. Now, Martin, we're sitting on our new chairs again, right? And some viewers wanted to know why the chairs had changed. But we were doing a public campaign, and so we were on the road. So unfortunately, fortunately, we had to pre-record some things. But now we're back with current events.
Yeah.
And we'll need to fasten our seatbelts, it seems to me, because a lot has happened, right?
Definitely. Let's pray. Oh, dear Heavenly Father, thank you very much for everything that you do for us. Thank you for your blessings, and we ask, please, Lord, that you enlighten our minds again and help us through this discussion. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. You know, Martin, how many letters have we received from people out there that are incredibly concerned about this vaccination issue?
Hundreds.
Hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
And a very disturbing thing about some of these letters is that people are very concerned about the stand of the church, where the church is standing in terms of this issue, because they feel that they do not want to or do want to take the vaccine, and they don't have any recourse to a religious exemption.
Correct.
Because of the official position. And some are at a loss as to what to do. And many are asking us whether we could be more forthright
Yeah.
in giving our opinion on this issue. And we have decided from the very beginning that our position will be one of providing information, but not of making decisions for people.
Yes.
Because we all have to individually make that decision for ourselves.
Correct.
We can perhaps say that it would have probably been better if there had been a sense of neutrality.
Correct.
It seems to many people that there is coercion
Yes.
to force them into a particular direction. And we need to address these things, because it is not going to get better. It's going to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
So we have titled this one A Personal Choice for a reason.
Yes.
It is a personal choice, but it is a momentous choice.
Correct. And as we've said in a previous one, that it is not anybody's prerogative to force their view on you, or even to try and coerce you into a certain direction.
Correct.
Including the church.
Correct. Because we have read statements from the Spirit of Prophecy which make it quite clear that coercion is not from God. He has never, ever used coercion to twist anybody's arm into a particular direction.
Mm-hmm.
The facts are there. You can accept it or you can reject it. So we're going to talk about a personal choice, but we're also going to provide some information,
Mm-hmm.
because without information, how do you make a choice, right?
Correct.
But before we go there, let's just look at a few interesting issues. I was listening to a podcast this last week where they were discussing conspiracy theorists.
Mm-hmm.
And the danger of conspiracy theories. And Martin, I was listening and I was rather surprised at how they address this issue. Because this affects the way in which we think.
Mm.
And it is very, very easy to categorize people and place them into positions where they belong to a fringe group.
Yes.
And marginalize them. And I don't know whether this is a healthy way to go in terms of debate. So in this podcast, they defined what, according to them and to things that they read, was a conspiracy theorist. And the definition that they used is that a conspiracy theorist is someone that demonizes people or groups. I found that a rather interesting definition.
Correct.
Someone that demonizes people or groups. Another statement that they made is that conspiracy theories are born out of fear or paranoia. Now that is already labeling people. And saying that they're born out of fear. Fear for what? People that talk about conspiracy theories, or that dare to speak about conspiracy theories, are sometimes those that are the most unfearful on the planet. They're willing to talk.
Exactly.
If you read Tapasosi's Rulers of Evil, in the introduction it says conspiracy theorists are those that have studied the issue. So these two definitions were very, very interesting to me. Someone that demonizes people or groups, and conspiracy theories are born out of fear or paranoia. Now, let's continue with that line of thought. So my question to you, Martin, is, was Martin Luther a conspiracy theorist by this definition?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? Because he demonized a person, the papacy,
Correct.
the Pope, and he demonized the church.
Yes.
So in other words, Martin Luther is a prime example, according to this definition, of a conspiracy theorist. Another question we have are those that claim that the Jesuits were created to destroy Protestantism conspiracy theorists.
According to the definition, yes.
Yes, because they're demonizing a group, right? Now, according to the Jesuits' own definition and according to their Jesuitical oath, weren't they created to destroy Protestantism?
Yes.
Weren't they even supposed to remove them from the face of the earth whenever opportunity arose, either by poison or by the leaden bullet or by strangulation?
Yes.
Isn't that part of their oath?
Correct.
So someone who speaks about Catholicism in a negative way, or the papacy in a negative way, according to their definition, would then be a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
If you then go into the subcategories of their army, you would also be considered a conspiracy theorist. But these groups in themselves, they can say anything they want on media, social media, in the political realm, in the ecclesiastical realm, and it will not be considered conspiracy theories.
Correct. They are allowed to demonize other persons or groups, and then the definition then the definition doesn't count.
Then the definition doesn't count. So I was just surprised at how incredibly one-sided and biased this conversation was. So let's go a little bit further. Are creationists conspiracy theorists? The majority of scientists out there in the world that teach at our universities, at the secular universities, at the mainstream universities, are they evolutionists or creationists?
Evolutionists.
Evolutionists. Would you say that it is a minority that is creationist?
Yes.
A minority. Now, do the two groups demonize each other?
Yes.
Constantly, right?
The whole time.
Which one is the conspiracy theorist?
Exactly.
Which one?
Well,
explain it to me.
Exactly. You can't decide.
Well, according to them, you can.
Oh, yes, unfortunately, because they decide who the conspiracy theorists are.
Correct. So off the bat, they will decide who the conspiracy theorists are. So if you are for God's word, per se, and you say that Genesis chapter 1 is, according to you, the truth, based even on the scientific data, then according to their definition, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yes.
Correct? That's very interesting. See, this is how one-sided your argument can become if you allow your mind to travel in that channel. Let's take it a little bit further because we want to get to present-day issues, right? Are those that question the official narrative on climate change conspiracy theorists?
Definitely.
Definitely, right?
Oh, yes.
Because the one group is demonizing the other group. Now, according to their discussion, those that are contrary in terms of their thinking regarding the official narrative of climate change are conspiracy theorists.
Correct.
They said it
Done.
bluntly.
Mhm.
They said it bluntly. I have a question. Are there thousands of scientists that do not agree with the official narrative in terms of climate change?
Yes. We've even shown some of them.
Are some of them the very top climatologists in the world?
Yes.
Are they all conspiracy theorists?
According to them, yes.
Or are they looking at the data in a way that, like a creationist that looks at the data in a particular way, brings them to the conclusion that the official narrative is just not tenable?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So according to them, somebody who preaches against this narrative of climate change is a conspiracy theorist.
Correct.
Now, Martin, are there alternative explanations for an increase in environmental disasters?
Yes.
Could some of them even, according to the scriptures, come from a spiritual realm?
Yes.
Did God not say that the calamities will increase?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Was he only acting in the natural realm, or was he also referring to the supernatural realm?
It's supernatural.
Are you convinced?
I'm definitely convinced.
Okay. All right. So that brings us to the next point. Are those that question the official narrative on the health crisis conspiracy theorists?
Definitely.
According to them, right?
Yes.
So if you question the official narrative, then you are demonizing the other group,
Mm-hmm.
and you are acting out of fear or paranoia.
Mm. That's what they say. Interesting that always the mainstream has a particular view and everybody else is conspiracy theorists.
Okay, so if we look at this little list that we have here, then I think we can safely say that the majority here consider themselves not conspiracy theorists,
Correct.
but the minority will be conspiracy theorists.
Yes.
All right. Now, what if, Martin, let's say on the issue of climate change, the majority actually does not believe it, but the minority that has access to the media
Mm-hmm.
and to manipulating the media has the voice
Yes.
and removes the other voice from the environment? Who then is the conspirator?
The minority.
Correct. Then that is the minority, right? All right. Now, let's go to the health crisis. Is there demonizing of those that are contrary to the official situation?
Definitely.
They demonize them.
It's actually terrible because I've looked at some, when there's a video on something that a scientist is saying, but it's contrary to the mainstream, then if you go and Google his name, immediately you'll get fact-checking that discredits him completely.
Correct. So, Martin, let's just think about this. So, if you have a situation where the official media immediately discredits and demonizes those that have an alternative view, even if they have a very informed view, are they then conspiracy theorists?
According to them, yes, those people are conspiracy theorists.
All right. But in actual fact, who's doing the demonizing? The
media.
official channel,
Yes.
the media. So who's the conspiracy theorist according to their definition?
Exactly. Them.
So this could become very interesting as to who's the conspiracy theorist. We could start throwing mud at each other ad infinitum.
Yeah.
And if someone says that they don't believe this, that, or the other, we can shout at them that they are conspiracy theorists.
That's it. You see, to silence somebody quickly is to call him a conspiracy theorist.
That's the way in which they go. Now, why I think this is an important discussion is because it's going to be very relevant in terms of what's coming in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So here's another question. Is it possible that truth could be demonized and classified as conspiracy theory by accepting one narrative over another?
Definitely.
Definitely, right?
Definitely.
All right. So here is a little note of warning to the church and to all that want to run in this line of thinking. Can we thus say, Martin, that conspiracy theorist is actually the equivalent of heretic in the old days?
It's the modern term of heretic.
All right, so they don't want to use the word heretic because that has a particular connotation. So they've rephrased it as conspiracy theorist.
Correct.
Now I want to ask you a question. Which organizations use this term the most?
The papacy, the Jesuits, and the state.
There are many that claim that the Jesuits actually coined the phrase conspiracy theorist.
I won't be surprised.
All right, so in other words, it is a modern term for a heretic. All right? Now, if we look at the New Catholic Dictionary published by the Universal Knowledge Foundation, a Roman Catholic institution, in 1929, that's an interesting date because that's when the little horn was resurrected after his mortal wound.
Yeah.
It stated, heresy, heresis, choice, deciding for oneself what one shall believe and practice. In the light of this, how dangerous is it for Protestant churches of any denomination to take this word into their mouth?
Extremely dangerous.
Aren't they emulating the church of the Middle Ages by demonizing people and labeling them as heretics, a modern term?
Correct. And if in those days the state enforced things, that was then church and state together, if you do it now, you again going with church
then
and
you
state.
are again doing it. Is there a movement to demonize those that have an alternative view on the vaccination?
No, definitely.
Are they calling them conspiracy theories?
Yes.
In other words, are they calling them heretics? And what is the penalty that they are seeking for them?
Well, eventually probably death.
Correct. But first they will start with disenfranchising them, demonizing them, black labeling them, preventing them from buying and selling, and then eventually bring out a death decree against them as something not fit to be in the environment because they are a danger to the environment. And if Protestant churches climb onto this bandwagon, aren't they repeating the history of the church of the Middle Ages?
Yes.
This is a very dangerous thing, right?
Yeah.
So let's get back to the questions that many of the viewers have. How do we deal with a modern situation where coercion is definitely part of the equation, and where there have been very specific statements that have come out, even out of the pens of the Protestant churches and our denomination as well, that have taken a particular stand on this issue? So let's see where we can go. One of the things that these people that label other people in conspiracy theories love to rely on is the facts checkers. Now, Martin, that's a very fascinating thing, to rely on a group of people that become the facts checkers.
Yeah.
It's like the Church of the Middle Ages that relied on the Inquisition to become the facts checkers.
Yeah.
And then you have churches that have little groups within themselves that become the facts checkers for the church.
They become the authority.
They become the authority, and it's a group of 3, 4, 5, 6 people, whatever number, and they will become the authority and the facts checkers for everyone else. Isn't that the same as the operation of the Inquisition?
It is the same.
And who says that the facts checkers are not demonizing the others and therefore by their own definition are conspiracy theorists?
Yeah.
So let's just have a look what Sky News had to say on this issue.
I want to take you through a story about how the word misinformation is being used as a weapon to censor legitimate reporting and criticism of leaders. Last week we discussed the fact check USA Today had placed on news stories that Joe Biden had checked his watch during a ceremony at Dover Air Force Base. The fact checker, pictured here, told the world these claims were false, fake news and misinformation. Social media companies use fact checks like this to police news organisations, and Facebook in particular actually purely relies on third-party fact checkers to police its platforms. These fact checkers have immense power and responsibility. We have seen what happens to Sky News if someone thinks that what we have published is misinformation. It can result in suspensions or even terminations of the right to enter the town square of digital debate and discussion. In this case, Daniel Funk became the spreader of misinformation he supposedly dedicated his career to stamping out. And when the social media pylon didn't slow down, he further hit back with this. It's easy to dunk on journalists when we get things wrong. I get it. To many, we're just another name on the screen. But behind that screen is a person trying to do their best. So you're the victim now, Daniel, not the families of dead soldiers you insinuated were lying, and just a wish-washy assurance that you were trying to do your best.
I find the whole concept of fact checkers, quote unquote, quite interesting because, I mean, isn't that what a journalist is meant to do anyway? I mean, if I put out a story that I knew was false, or I hadn't done my due diligence to check the facts that I was putting forward in the story, I'm not doing my job. I don't know why we have these supposed fact checkers. I mean, that's just what every journalist ought to be doing all of the time with anything they are publishing or saying or writing or whatever. But time and again what happens, particularly on social media, is that someone spreads misinformation, and it's worse when it comes from a journalist, but someone spreads misinformation, that takes hold very quickly, gets lots of retweets and likes on Facebook and shares and whatever. That takes off, everyone then believes it. Then when it is found to be wrong, they put out this meek and mild apology which no one retweets and no one shares on Facebook, and very few people actually realise that what they were fed in the first place was wrong. So it's all good and well to say, well, I'm sorry, it was wrong, but you've already done the damage, and it's very difficult to come back from that.
So Martin, do we need a little group of facts checkers that become the gold standard for what is the truth?
What's interesting to me is that the fact checkers are only checking the conspiracy theorists.
All right. Now, what if these facts checkers were to use the official narrative to check out the anti-evolutionists to see whether their facts were straight or not?
Well, actually they did. You remember a while back we had that one on creation that Snopes put out.
Oh, correct.
Remember.
All right. So these facts checkers are the gold standard, and everybody runs to them.
And I just want to maybe put it in here. A lot of these fact checkers are a single individual.
Yes.
There's not a group of guys that have to run things through each other.
I think the biggest facts checker on the world stage is the Pope.
Yes.
And if you dare to cross him, then you are a conspiracy theorist. No, you're worse. You're a terrorist, according to their own definition.
Correct.
Do we want to go that way?
No.
I think we should be very careful when we use our terminology. We can say, like Martin Luther, let the minds clash, but don't label people with names because you don't know what they know, nor have you done the research that some of them have done.
If you want to get in a conversation about something, come with facts, not a fact checker.
Correct. That brings us to our topic. What is the current situation in terms of the debate regarding the vaccination? Again, let's reiterate, we're not going to make choices for people. But it is imperative that people get the information on which to base their choices. The mainstream does everything in its power to push one particular narrative, and the other one is constantly suppressed. So it's important that we look at the other side as well. Now, before we do that, here is a statement from the Spirit of Prophecy. It comes from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5. There are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there is only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. Pure air and water, cleanliness, a proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God are remedies for want of which thousands are dying. I think as a basis for our discussion, this is a very important point. There is only one way that heaven approves. And no matter how much you try to distort that statement, it cannot be distorted. So let's just say there is no compromise possible in that. And many times in the past we've shown statements where the use of drugs in the medical world is very, very strongly advised against, right?
Yes.
Here's an interesting study that was published in the International Journal of Epidemiology. And I thought this one was worth reading. Age-adjusted death rates were reported to be greater in countries with greater numbers of doctors. That's a very strange thing. This is a peer-reviewed journal, right?
Correct.
Equally difficult to explain, death rates for diseases amenable to treatment were reported to be greatest in areas with the most medical care resources. That's also interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Iatrogenic mortality, let's just stop there and go to a definition. Here's the definition. Iatrogenic, it's an adjective, relating to illness caused by medical examination or treatment. Drugs may cause side effects which can lead to iatrogenic disease. So in other words, this is disease or mortality that is caused directly by medical treatment or intervention.
Yeah.
May similarly help to explain that great numbers of doctors and medical resources are associated with higher death rates. Isn't that the opposite of what you would expect, Martin?
Yeah, completely the opposite.
The greater number of doctors and medical resources are associated with higher death rates. Iatrogenic mortality is also reflected in the observation of brief but dramatic decreases in population death rates when doctors strike and surgery for elective operations are suspended. So when the doctors are on strike, when they're not there, death rates go down. The drop in death rates during physicians' strike is substantial, as high as 60% within a period of only a week to 10 days. That's a very scary statistic, isn't it?
Definitely.
You know, let's not be harsh. There's no doubt that medical intervention saves lives. And I've listened to many doctors who have realized that the situation is really quite serious. And many of them have opted rather not to be drug interventionists, but to concentrate on saving lives by being trauma doctors or alternative healthcare workers or whatever. There is a very interesting clash coming between the natural methods that God seems to sanction and those that are being practiced in the world.
I think it's not coming. I think it's raging already.
All right.
And I just want to maybe put this out there. There's a very interesting chapter in Ministry of Healing about the role of a doctor. And I would encourage anybody to go and read that.
Absolutely. So when it comes to this issue of vaccination and non-vaccination, the debate is by no means closed as to the efficacy of vaccination. Now, in my own case, I had nothing against vaccination. In fact, I have received numerous vaccination. And sometimes when I traveled to some areas, it was compulsory to receive vaccinations, to which I had no particular qualm. But the more I study the issue, and the more I delve into the history of vaccination, I have come to the conclusion that all is not well in the state of Denmark. That's just a saying, in case you think I'm only talking about Denmark. But that is the case. The more information we have, the more likely it is that we become conspiracy theorists.
Yes. The more you study the subject, the more likely you are to become a conspiracy.
Like in the foreword of Rulers of Evil, the more you study it, the more likely you are to become a conspiracy theorist. So, Martin, basically the debate is not over. In fact, the debate has just begun. But already certain groups are being demonized and others not.
Correct.
Correct? Let's have a look at how this is happening. Here's an article from September 2021. Biden's war on virus becomes war on unvaccinated. They're a source of frustration, a risk to their fellow citizens, a threat to the nation's economic recovery. Let's just stop there. On the basis of what data?
Yeah.
On the basis of a particular set of data set forth by a particular group that has now decided to demonize the other group that is looking at the data from a different angle.
Yeah.
Correct?
Correct.
Now, this is a very, very dangerous situation.
Yes.
Because if a church takes a position to decide which one of the two sides they're going to back, is it possible that they could be working at cross purposes with God himself?
Yes, if you're on the wrong side.
All right? If you take this issue away and you make it the creation evolution debate, is it possible that they could demonize those that believe in creation?
No, it's not possible. They're doing it.
All right, then what would the church do? What side would they take? Well, most of the mainline churches have decided they will go with the science.
Correct.
So when you make the statement, we will go with the science, then you've already made a value judgment and you've already decided for one set of science as opposed to another set of science. And you could just possibly be on the wrong side.
Yes.
And you could just possibly end up fighting against God.
Correct.
Is it possible?
Yes. And especially when those churches join with state.
And when the church and the state join together, then you have the image of the beast.
That's it.
And I'm wondering, would we want to be part of the image of the beast? What happens to the image of the beast eventually?
Destroyed.
It is destroyed. So this is a very, very serious issue. And it becomes an issue that will escalate. Because we know that this medical issue, this right arm, cannot be divorced from the issue of the mark of the beast.
No.
It is not the mark of the beast, but it is the right arm of the image of the beast. It is the right arm of the beast, and it has an opposite one, a right arm of the third angel's message. They're going to come into conflict. And this clash is going to escalate. And I would like to tell my brothers and sisters in the faith, and anybody else listening out there, that this is the beginning of the final events. And we will be talking about that in future ones, because people will say, no, this is just a glitch on the horizon. It has nothing to do with the mark of the beast. No, it does.
It does.
It is the forerunner of the mark of the beast. So they're a source of frustration, a risk to their fellow citizens, a threat to the nation's economic recovery. This is exactly what the papacy is saying.
Exactly.
And this is the beast, and the kings of the world aligning themselves with the beast. This is what it is. President Joe Biden is trying to concentrate the anger of the nation's inoculated majority against the stubborn 25% of eligible Americans who remain unvaccinated against COVID-19. So you are demonizing a group.
Mm-hmm.
So they must be conspiracy theorists, because
Yeah.
they're the ones that are doing the demonizing, right? A distinct minority of Americans, supported by a distinct minority of elected officials, are keeping us from turning the corner, Biden said. These pandemic politics are making people sick, causing unvaccinated people to die. This is a very interesting statement, because now suddenly he's concerned about the unvaccinated, whereas in the previous sentence he demonizes them. It was just 2 months ago that Biden prematurely declared the nation's independence from the pandemic. Now, despite more than 75% of Americans having at least one dose of the vaccine, the US is seeing about 300% more COVID-19 infections a day, about 2.5 times more hospitalizations, and nearly twice the number of deaths compared to the same time last year. Now, Martin, this science is not a fixed science, because they will blame the unvaccinated for the increase.
They're already doing it.
But the facts of the matter are that the other side is saying, no, this variant that is being produced is as a consequence of the vaccinated and not as a consequence of the unvaccinated. So let's have a look at that issue. This is Politico. Biden's top-down booster plan sparks anger at the FDA. Acting FDA Commissioner Janet Woodcock sent a memo Tuesday evening to vaccine regulators, reiterating her support as frustration of the process spreads within their ranks. FDA officials are scrambling to collect and analyze data that clearly demonstrate the boosters' benefits before the administration's 20 September deadline for rolling them out to most adults. Many outside experts and some within the agency see uncomfortable similarities between the Biden team top-down booster plan and the former President Donald Trump's attempt to goad FDA into accelerating its initial authorization process for COVID-19 vaccines and push through unproven virus treatments. On Tuesday, 2 top FDA vaccine regulators resigned. Isn't that interesting?
Interesting.
A decision that one former official said was rooted in anger over the agency's lack of autonomy in the booster planning so far. A current health official said the pair, Marion Gruber and Philip Krause, left over differences with the FDA top vaccine official Peter Marks. Now the agency is facing a potential mutiny amongst its staff and outside vaccine advisors. Martin, is everybody in agreement within the FDA?
No. And now they will probably be coined as conspiracy theorists.
All right. So within the same organization, some are now conspiracy theorists and some are not, or have just become conspiracy theorists. Why? Because they're looking at the facts differently. Do you see how dangerous it is to apply labels?
Correct.
Endpoint News. In a major blow to vaccine efforts, senior FDA leaders stepping down. We don't have to read it all,
No.
but we'll read this portion. A former senior FDA leader told Endpoints that they're departing because they're frustrated. The CDC and the ACIP committees are involved in decisions that they think should be up to the FDA. The former FDA also said he's heard they're upset about CBER Director Peter Marks for not insisting that those decisions should be kept inside the FDA. What finally did it for them was the White House getting ahead of FDA on booster shots. All right, so who's making the decisions now? The so-called scientists or the government?
Yeah, it seems like the government has taken over. And this is state taking over.
All right, so that they're doing it quickly. They want it done quickly.
And just an important point that was on the previous slide, Trump did the same.
So it doesn't matter whether it's the one administration or the other administration. Somebody's going to be demonized, right? How far is this going? Here's LifeSite, 16 September. Alberta Premier makes it illegal for unvaccinated to gather, introduces vaccine passports. Now, we don't have to read it all, but it's interesting that he says that they also include banning unvaccinated people from gathering in their private homes. What does that mean?
I don't know. It's crazy.
In other words, you may not have friends over or somebody you're totally isolated. Have they already demonized certain groups?
Yep.
So the decision not to get vaccinated is not just a personal choice. It has real consequences for our whole society and the ability of our hospitals to cope. So he claims. But who are the people in the hospitals these days? In the vaccinated countries?
The vaccinated.
The vaccinated. So this is a double standard of incredible proportions. How far is this going? Well, here we have an official statement from the government of Nigeria.
People who are not yet vaccinated at all will have to depend on remote access to these gatherings. So from the second week of September, people may not be allowed to worship in churches and mosques without showing proof of their vaccination cards at the gates. Similarly, people will not be allowed to event centers for parties or receptions without showing proof of their vaccination cards at the gates of these occasions. We have made adequate arrangements with security to prevent anybody who does not have a vaccination card from accessing any of these events. Also, you will not be allowed to access banking services in Edo State from the middle of September if you have not been vaccinated. If you want to undertake banking services, you will do so remotely from your home.
So the screws are being tightened, right?
Definitely.
But now they're flip-flopping, right?
Correct.
So let's listen to what Biden had to say on that issue.
I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power. Just like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide.
Can we mandate vaccines across the country? No, that's not a role that the federal government, I think, even has the power to make.
We cannot require someone to be vaccinated. That's just not what we can do. It is a matter of privacy to know who is or who isn't.
No, definitely not. You don't want to mandate and try and force anyone to take a vaccine. We've never done that. We don't want to be mandating from the federal government to the general population. It would be unenforceable and not appropriate.
So things are changing so quickly that the population is becoming numb to what the state of affairs was just the other day. For a quick recap, a year ago, they were telling you, maybe you shouldn't take the vaccine because Trump created it. A few months ago, they were assuring you, Nancy Pelosi in April assured you, we're never going to require vaccines because we can't do that. We don't have the power. Your medical status is a sacred matter of privacy. Again, that was in April. On Thursday, they required vaccines. Here's where we are today.
I'm announcing that the Department of Labor is developing an emergency rule to require all employers with 100 or more employees that together employ over 80 million workers to ensure their workforces are fully vaccinated or show a negative test at least once a week. We're going to protect vaccinated workers from unvaccinated coworkers. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us.
I would support that if you want to get on a plane and travel with other people, that you should be vaccinated.
Flying on an airplane remains a hazard. No one knows the vaccination status of any of the fellow passengers. You're locked in this tube. And it's a privilege to travel.
There's more mandates I wish he would have given. I think mandating vaccines for air travel, train travel, or interstate bus travel would also be important.
There are privileges associated with being an American, that if you wish to have these privileges, you need to get vaccinated. Travel and having the right to travel interstate, it's not a constitutional right as far as I know, to board a plane.
We have a really unfortunate situation that we have a pretty hardcore group of people that we're trying to persuade them or mandate them, if they're not persuaded, to get vaccinated. So we have about 75 million people who are eligible to be vaccinated who have not yet gotten vaccinated. That's the key to ending this. I mean, that would be the key. You would cut down dramatically the number of infections if we got the overwhelming majority of that recalcitrant group vaccinated, which is really a shame, somewhat paradoxical. We have the tools to end this, and yet we're not doing it. I mean, for reasons that are almost inexplicable. You know, people, because of their science, their political bent, feel that they don't want to be told to mask up, and they don't want to be told to get vaccinated.
What do you think could change that?
Well, I think that if you get trusted public messengers who put aside political ideologies and convince people to get vaccinated, the other way to do it is to have many, many more mandates. I know that rankles a lot of people, but you're going to see situations locally. I don't think you're going to see centrally derived mandates, but they're going to be mandates where colleges, universities, places of business, large corporations, they're going to say, if you want to work for us, you've got to be vaccinated. And I believe that's going to turn this around, because I don't think people are going to want to not go to work or not go to college or not go to university. They're going to do it. You'd like to have them do it on a totally voluntary basis. But if that doesn't work, you've got to go to the alternatives.
It sounds to me the lamb is speaking like a dragon.
And that just reiterates how dangerous it is to put your side on this.
Okay, so basically, let's sum it up. What they just said is we give you freedom of choice, provided your choice is our choice.
That's it.
That's it. That's speaking like a dragon.
And there's nothing that they said this, they can't change their mind.
Correct. Based on what? Based on their science.
Exactly.
Thousands of scientists on the other side are saying the opposite. So which science are you going to run with, and which science are you going to demonize? This is a very important decision. Are we going to run with the beast, or are we going to separate ourselves from the world? Another point that's very important in all of this is we spoke about fact checkers that seem to only verify the official narrative. But when it comes to permission to implement certain things, often there is more than one organization involved. So the CDC will do one thing, and then it has to be approved by another organization. Now, if we look at this, it becomes very interesting. Here, from Jesuit News. It's a very interesting source, isn't that, Martin?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So this is not conspiratorial.
No, it's from Jesuit News. Dr. Anthony Fauci and his wife, Dr. Christine Grady, received the Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam Award from Jesuit East last month for their decades-long impact on public health. So they are both in public health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Christine Grady is an American nurse and bioethicist who serves as the head of the Department of Bioethics at the National Institute of Health Clinical Center. Grady graduated from Livingston High School, after which she earned a BS in nursing and biology from Georgetown University. These people are all Jesuit educated. And a Master of Science in Nursing from Boston University, and a PhD in philosophy from Georgetown University. I wonder who molded her thinking.
You remember that one that we did long ago where we showed the video of Fauci?
Yes.
Where he acknowledged what a huge impact his education from the Jesuits had on how he works in the public today.
She's the one that is married to Anthony Fauci, an American immunologist, and head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the National Institute of Health. So when the one needs approval, the other organization gives it, and they're both run by Fauci's. How's that for facts checking? Well, here's some more interesting information. External peer review of RT-PCR test to detect SARS-CoV-2 reveals 10 major scientific flaws at the molecular and methodological level, consequences for false positive results. Then it talks about the individuals involved, and you can see 22 scientists conducting this peer-reviewed study concluded the following. If someone is tested by PCR as positive when a threshold of 35 cycles or higher is used, as is the case in most laboratories in Europe and the US, the probability that said person is actually infected is less than 3%. The probability that said result is false positive is 97%. So, Martin, we've discussed this before. This test that is being used to determine the issues at large is practically useless for the use that it is being put to, right?
Even the inventor of it said it.
Even the inventor said so. Here's another article from the CDC. The CDC admits in mid-2020 about this testing that it is indefinite and unreliable. So the diagnostic panel concluded detection of viral RNA may not indicate the presence of infectious virus or that 2019 nCoV is the causative agent for clinical symptoms. This test cannot rule out diseases by other bacterial or viral pathogens. So the test is inconclusive.
And it comes back to what that Sky News contributor said. The facts are not being twittered around the world and put out there.
Everything is based on this PCR test. Yeah. In fact, if you're not vaccinated, you have to be tested weekly.
Yes.
With a 3% efficacy? Does that make any sense whatsoever? It doesn't even fit their own science. So the peer review journal states so, and the CDC states so by itself. These are not conspiracy theories. These are facts. These issues have been discussed by very, very prominent people and very many concerned scientists in the world. There's a lawyer in Europe who is very, very active in pursuing this issue. And I think everybody at this stage should know about him already. But he also, of course, is being marginalized and demonized. Mm-hmm. But Rainer Füllmich has conducted numerous interviews, in fact, hundreds of hours of interviews with some of the most reputable scientists in the world. And they've come to the conclusion that there is a gross misconduct taking place in the world, and they are taking governments and institutions to court based on the information that they have. Now, we have a video of his, which is very long, and which we obviously cannot play in the course of this lecture. But I would suggest that every single viewer watch this video in its completeness in order to be able to make an informed choice. This is what it's all about. So we're going to play just a short little introduction, and then we'll put the link into this video so that you can look at it for yourself. It's about information.
I would actually encourage them, all the videos that we're going to show. We've only put in short because this presentation will be too long. Encourage them. Go and watch these videos.
So that you can make an informed choice.
Hello, I'm Rainer Fomich, and I want to tell you about the results of the investigations of the Berlin Corona Committee to date. I've been working together with my colleagues in my firm as a trial lawyer for 27 years. I'm licensed to practice law in Germany and in California. Until COVID emerged, we exclusively represented consumers and small and medium-sized businesses against global criminal corporations such as Deutsche Bank, VW, and Kühn & Nagel, the world's largest freight carrier. That changed after a virus previously labeled harmless was suddenly declared the cause of a global pandemic in March of 2020, and the world was suppressed with lockdowns, social distancing, and mask mandates, as well as mass PCR testing and so-called vaccinations for perfectly healthy people.
So that's all we're showing. The information follows hereafter. But just to tell the viewers, there are movements afoot to put the alternative view before the world, even through the legal system.
Yes.
Because it is being suppressed. Now, unfortunately, Martin, even though many scientists are very passionate about it, and many scientists believe that eventually the truth will be triumphant, unfortunately, and I say this with much sadness and trepidation, I don't believe they will succeed, because prophecy tells me that this is what is going to happen in the final stages of Earth's history.
Correct.
And there is a certain group of people that has to be demonized, that has to be labeled, so that eventually the prophetic picture can come to fulfillment. So, as noble as their efforts are, and as grandiose as they might be, they, according to my opinion, will not succeed, even though their cause might be right. All right, here's another video by Dr. Brian Artis. He's one of the people that was interviewed by Rainer Fomich. And what he has to say is so shocking that one would rather not believe it. But he has the evidence to back his case. And he is willing to go out on a limb and speak before hundreds of people to state the case. Martin, is this a person that seems to you fearful?
No, definitely not. Not one of these.
Not one of these seem to be fearful. They're standing up in the face of great opposition, willing to take a stand. You know, I was horrified when I heard that definition of what a so-called conspiracy theorist is. So let's just hear what he has to say in a public forum.
I have to give a great big thank you to Dr. Rainer Fomich out of Germany. Did y'all see that interview? The German Corona Committee Foundation reached out to me and asked me to provide all of the documentation to them who are suing the World Health Organization with 1,000 doctors. $10,000 MDs, and they reached out to me privately to give them a 1.5-hour documentation of Anthony Fauci's knowledge of how he was going to kill people before the pandemic started, how he's still doing it right now while you're seated here, and I'm going to give you some of that information here, and I want to put up a slide. Let's look at the Ebola study. This is what I did in May 2020. I've been in the media ever since to educate you guys the current genocidal attempt and murderous attempts of Anthony Fauci, the NIH, the FDA, the CDC are all using remdesivir the same way that they used gas chambers to destroy people in Germany. This is how they're doing it and perpetuating those deaths, using a drug in hospitals. This is the actual Ebola study that Anthony Fauci quoted in May 2020, proved, he said, we're going to use this non-FDA approved drug. It's been approved since, but it wasn't before the pandemic. We're going to use this non-FDA approved drug called remdesivir because it was shown to be safe and efficacious against the Ebola virus in 2018 and 2019. They actually found, you can see here, you see mortality up there? Definition inside the study. They found that remdesivir, in 6 months, the safety board pulled remdesivir from the study, a 1-year study, because it killed more people than any of the other 3 drugs, including ZMapp, which was put in by the FDA and the NIH. So 6 months into the study, they pulled remdesivir, they pulled ZMapp, which was supplied by our government to Africa because it killed more people. How many people did it kill? Remdesivir killed 54% of all people in the study that got the drug. Do you know what they're treating all of your loved ones with and those you care about in this country now? Next slide, please. Look up here. I'm not lying. This is from the study. Look at the second column from the right, remdesivir. Look below there. 54%. You see that? Mortality rate. This is the maker of remdesivir's own trial study. Next slide, please. What did they find? Check this out. 23% in 10 days had serious adverse events. The most common serious adverse events were multiple organ dysfunction syndrome, which is defined as the #1 cause of death in all ICUs, by the way. Second, septic shock, acute kidney failure, and hypotension. Look at the next part. 8% had to be discontinued because remdesivir treatment, it worsened or prevented, pre-existing kidney failure and multiple organ failure. They were calling it secondary pneumonia. You have to listen to me. Still today, they are calling it pneumonia from corona. No, it isn't. They are shutting down everybody's kidneys with remdesivir, causing their lungs to fill with fluid, and they are drowning them to death. Do you want to know why this made me so angry? In May 2020, February 2020, I watched a hospital in Dallas, Texas, kill my father-in-law with the same protocols.
Martin, that is shocking information. And this information was available to Dr. Fauci.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because the same article that Dr. Fauci used to substantiate the use of remdesivir actually said that it's dangerous.
Correct. Now, how many doctors did he say were involved in suing the World Health Organization?
Thousands.
Are they all conspiracy theorists? So are you allowed to have an opinion, and are you allowed to express that opinion? Here's another one, of course, that is being demonized. This eminent doctor. Eminent doctor, COVID vaccine is bioterrorism by injection and has likely caused at least 50,000 deaths in the US. During the explosive June 11 interview, McCullough, an internist and cardiologist, along with being a professor of medicine and editor of 2 major medical journals, began his comments asserting, "I believe that we're under the application of a form of bioterrorism. That's worldwide, and that appears to have been many years in the planning." I want just saying something like that immediately categorizes him as a conspiracy theorist. But what if the facts substantiate what he is saying?
How I got involved is, as a doctor, I thought the virus was going to be pretty easy to treat once we understood there were 3 phases: the viral replication, cytokine storm, and thrombosis. And so as I promulgated early treatment, I started to meet resistance at all levels in terms of actually treating patients and then publishing papers. And so I'm the editor of 2 major journals. I'm in the business of publishing. So fortunately, I had enough publication strength to publish basically the only 2 papers in the entire medical literature that teaches doctors how to treat COVID-19 at home to prevent hospitalization and death. And we did the best we could without any funding or government support, and we demonstrated that it results in about an 85% reduction in hospitalization and death. So what we had discovered is that the suppression of early treatment was tightly linked to the development of a vaccine. I want to mention that we're paying attention to who's attacking us.
Yes.
When I testified in the Texas Senate, I was attacked by a French reporter. French. why are the French watching Texas Senate? So recently I was very heavily attacked in the media by a Singapore woman, and we traced her directly to the Gates Foundation. I'm actually taking the moral authority, and I'm challenging who here has a greater amount. I said, in a single person, I've seen and examined more patients. I've treated more patients. I've published more on COVID-19. I have the best academic record. I've had the illness myself. My father has had it. I've had a death in my family due to the illness. Who in one single person in the world can say that?
Yeah.
So I am taking the moral and clinical and ethical and human authority and challenging anybody to come after me. You know, in the United States, in one state, they've already put the groundwork that the kids age 12 can accept the vaccine on their own without family consent. That's never happened in history. In Toronto the other day, they lured the kids out to get ice cream, and they held the parents back, and they were vaccinating the kids.
Oh, my God.
It's terrible. My wife is Canadian, and her mother was forcibly vaccinated. She doesn't speak English very well, and a healthcare worker came over. There was some type of dispute, and before she knew it, she was injected. She doesn't even know what she got. So it's happening. I predict that it will come to forcible injection. They're going to take it this far.
So Martin, is this doctor acting out of fear and paranoia, or is he brave?
Definitely not fear and paranoia.
Okay. So we have to be careful about our definitions, right? Here is another very interesting development, and this man is a very, very prominent scientist of the highest caliber. August 17, 2021. French vaccine expert Professor Christian Perron stated that vaccinated are more at risk from variants and should be quarantined. This is exactly the opposite of what the media is saying, isn't it?
Yes.
So could you expect this man to be demonized?
Definitely.
He had major responsibilities within several institutions, the Pasteur Institute in Paris, Vice Director of the National Tuberculosis Reference Center, French College of Professors of Infectious and Tropical Diseases. I mean, his list of credentials is just absolutely amazing. What did he have to say?
It is a reverse. Vaccinated people are at risk for the new variants and transmit it. It's proven now in different countries. So vaccinated people should be put in quarantine and should be isolated from the society. And unvaccinated people are not dangerous. Vaccinated people are dangerous for others. It's proven in Israel now, as I'm in contact with many physicians in Israel. They have a big problems. Now, severe cases in hospitals are among vaccinated people. And in UK also, you had a large vaccination program, and also there are problems. But the Delta variant is not very dangerous. All the variants since last year are less and less virulent. It's always a story of infectious diseases.
So in other words, he is saying that the vaccinated ones are the problem and not the unvaccinated. Now, can you see, Martin, how easy it can be for one group to demonize another?
Yes.
Now, both groups are demonizing each other. The one group is saying it's the vaccinated, and the other group is saying it's the unvaccinated. Let's just step back there. Let's stop demonizing one another. Let us say, let's trust in God that whether we have been vaccinated, whether we think it is right or whether we think it is wrong, we still have to exercise the same faith in God.
Correct.
And if we feel that we've done a wrong thing or we've taken a wrong step, then how do we deal with it? Then do what is right in as far as your sphere allows you. And trust in God, and He will take us through this.
Yes.
So which side are we going to back? Well, you have to look at the data. And you have to make your own decision. And this is what we are doing. We're providing information. Now, Martin, here's an article from the journal Science. Now, if you have been in the scientific world, if you want an article to be published, you surely would want to have it published, as we said before, in either the journal Nature or in the journal Science. This is the gold standard of peer-reviewed journals. And it's stated there in an article on the 26th of August 2021, having SARS-CoV-2 once confers much greater immunity than a vaccine, but vaccination remains vital. Actually, it's a bit of a contradiction in terms, but nevertheless, they admit that the immunity that you receive from having overcome the disease is much greater than the immunity that you can receive from the vaccine. The natural immune protection that develops after SARS-CoV-2 infection offers considerably more of a shield against the Delta variant of the pandemic coronavirus than 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, according to a large Israeli study that some scientists wish with a "don't try this at home" label. If only it weren't so.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying.
But that's what the fact of the matter is. So if you read this, then you ask yourself, if you've had it, then what's the point of being vaccinated?
Correct.
All right.
And then I also ask myself, is it correct the way that they are coercing people now?
Here's another scientific article from August the 25th, 2021, and it compares the SARS-CoV-2 natural immunity to the vaccine-induced immunity. And we can see that their conclusion is the following. This study demonstrated that natural immunity confers longer lasting and stronger protection against infection, symptomatic disease, and hospitalization caused by the Delta variant of SARS-CoV-2, compared to a 2-dose vaccine-induced immunity. Individuals who were both previously infected with SARS-CoV-2 and given a single dose of the vaccine gained additional protection against the Delta variant. So again, natural immunity seems to work. Of course, if you are not vaccinated, then they say you have a greater chance of getting the disease and being more debilitated. But the people who are now getting the disease and are being hospitalized are those that have been vaccinated.
Yes.
Here's another video that just shows how doctors are being demonized in the world. If they have an alternative view, the whole video will be in the description and people can look at it. But again, who is being demonized here? And who therefore is, according to the definition, the conspiracy theorist?
The one
right?
that's demonizing.
Correct.
Hello, my name is Dr. Sam Dubé, and I'm a non-clinical physician. I'm also a retired faculty member in university for engineering mathematics and a strength and conditioning coach with some experience in sports broadcasting. I am here today with 4 Canadian physicians and their legal representations. Our purpose is to expose the atrocious treatment of these physicians by their medical governing bodies, that is their provincial medical governing bodies, and to show the public what's actually happening during this alleged pandemic with people who have your best interests at heart, that is your physicians.
I was 4 years on a committee. It's called the CHCP, the Committee on Healthcare and Promotion, which dealt with issues of broader healthcare, i.e. public health at the Canadian Medical Association. For my last year, I was the chair of that committee, and I believe it's been about 6 or 7 years on the Doctors Nova Scotia Public Health Committee, and just finished my 2-year tenure as a head of that committee. And that doesn't get into, I've been on numerous local community health boards. So I have a long interest in public health, and it's given me a certain perspective on COVID planning.
My name's Charles Hoff. I'm a family physician and emergency room physician. I did my medical training in South Africa. I came to Canada in 1990, so I have been in Canada. I've been a dyed-in-the-wool, rural GP and emerge physician for 31 years. And so the last 28 of those have been in Lytton, British Columbia.
My name is Francis Christian. I've been a surgeon for more than 20 years. I have a fellowship from the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, and I have a fellowship from the Royal College of Surgeons of Canada. Up until the 23rd of June, I was the Director of Quality Improvement and Patient Safety in the Department of Surgery in the University of Saskatchewan. My designation was also Clinical Professor. I was also the Director of our Surgical Humanities program.
Been an assistant professor at the university here, done loads of teaching over the years, been president of our Provincial Association of Pathologists, done a lot of Royal College work, chairman of the Examination Committee in General Pathology. I'm currently the CEO of a biotech company in North Carolina. I practice in the States. I practice in Britain, general practice, in Canada, in the States.
So Martin, these are not just ordinary people.
No.
These are highly educated people with a very specific opinion based on the way in which they look at the facts. Should they have the right to be heard?
Definitely.
Okay. Here's another statement that involved Stanford medicine. It says, rushed COVID-19 vaccine obsession unwarranted and dangerous. An emergency experimental vaccine can't be expected to be safer than a viral disease with a very high survival rate, such as COVID-19. With no treatment, the average survival rate is 99.74%, and highly successful and generally safe treatments are confirmed and documented in hundreds of studies. Such treatments could easily achieve universal survivability from COVID if made widely available. Dr. John Ioannidis, professor at Stanford University, is the most widely cited biomedical scientist in the world. Here again is some very disturbing evidence. Here's an apparent study on mass murder in UK care homes via government midazolam treatment. Now, this is a substance that can be used in euthanasia. And as in the American studies where the protocol actually killed people, according to the data. So here, the evidence is that some of these people might actually have been euthanized. Now we're really deep into conspiracies, right? A team of British lawyers uncovered evidence that the UK's NHS early 2020 countrywide order to administer midazolam to the elderly in care homes caused an extensive number of deaths labelled as COVID-19 on the death certificates. The main thrust occurred in April and May with a predictable huge spike in mortality. A 2-year supply of midazolam purchased at the outset of the pandemic and was exhausted by October of 2020. This drug can cause life-threatening aspiration problems and lead to permanent brain injury or death. It is used in executions by lethal injections in the United States. Amnesty International reported that during this time period there was a blanket application of do not resuscitate orders in all UK care homes. Now, Martin, if this is true, then this is a very serious allegation. And we'll put this into a totally different category. Now, is it only this evidence that we have here? No, this is the evidence from undertakers that have also come forward with regard to this issue. Let's listen to this.
So what are you seeing now, being a funeral director? How are you seeing things over the last couple of years, mate? Did you see a pandemic last year?
Well, kind of rewinding back to 2020, in March and April, we saw a brief spike for about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, where unusually the phone started ringing. And as a society, we're very good at getting people to pass away in hospital. And I would say if I have 10 collections of deceased, 8 of them would be hospital removals, 1 of them would be from a care home, and 1 of them would be either a residential address where someone's gone home to die, or a hospice where people go to die for palliative care. So I got called every night for 3 weeks to care homes, and this was at a time when Matt Hancock, who's since been dismissed from government, had transferred all of the elderly in hospitals into care homes. He'd been very careful to label them all as COVID, and he put them into care homes. And I've since found out that at the exact same time, there was a 1,000% increase in the amount of midazolam sedative purchased at that time. And there's an extensive paper trail that documents that very clearly. Now, I worked for the big funeral provider for 10 years who have 60% market share. And in that time, I was never, ever called to a care home 3 consecutive nights. You know, so for me being a small family undertaker to suddenly be called every night for nearly 3 weeks exclusively to care homes and nowhere else is remarkably, it's probably about as likely as me winning the lottery several times in 3 weeks. It just doesn't happen. It's impossible. November, December came and went. We were doing funerals. It wasn't busy. In fact, even despite the great effort they made in care homes to bump the numbers up, overall 2020 was quieter than 2019 for death rate. And the vast majority of funerals we do in the UK are cremation funerals. I would estimate around 95% of them are cremations, and the odd 5% would be burials. We weren't up on numbers, and it was the same everywhere. The statistics don't lie. They're there, government statistics that show there was no real increase. All I can tell you is my experience as a funeral director, and I've washed and dressed well over 100 COVID cases now, many of them still warm. You're being lied to. You're being lied to. And please do reach out to me to verify who I am, because I'll be happy to pick up the phone, because we'll leave a legacy, guys. And if my legacy is truth and honesty, and I save one of you out there, your families are just as important as mine. You know, so if that is my gift to the world before I'm swiftly dispatched from it, I'll take it.
Is he fearful, Martin?
Definitely not.
No, he's coming forward and he's saying what he feels he wants to say. And he found the vials of the injectable material still next to the bodies that he had to come and pick up. Now, this is information that people will be skeptical about. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is that the death rate was no higher than previous years. Here's another interview, and this one is very interesting. And this is with Dr. David Martin, another very prominent individual with very interesting information. And he was also one of the people that was interviewed by Rainer Füllmich.
Yes.
So let's have a look at this information.
When you inject a known toxin, and we're going to get into this when we talk about the biological and chemical weapons laws and treaties of the United States and the world, for that matter. When you inject a known toxin into a person, you are actually injecting an agent of death. That's what you're doing. And you cannot sit there and hide behind the diaphanous fig leaf of going, well, we're doing it in the public interest, when you know, not have a hunch, you know that it is in fact lethal in many instances. Pfizer has even stated that they have an acceptable death rate.
And a lot of people say, well, there are risks with every vaccine.
Yeah, but it's not a risk when you know that you are putting and get this very carefully, because this is where the RNA story falls apart. People think that somehow or another a piece of SARS coronavirus was turned into a vaccine. That is not true. A computer simulated synthetic chimeric computer-generated code uploaded by the Chinese in January was given to Moderna to put into an injection so that your cells, in the case of the RNA vaccines, so that your cells would produce the S1 spike protein synthesis, not the actual virus the way we used to do vaccines. This was a computer code uploaded by the Chinese into U.S. manufacturing to inject a pathogen stimulant into the American population. Let's get really, really clear.
So, Martin, we're citing very prominent people here. And now we're going to introduce a Jewish doctor who actually was the one who treated the presidents of the world when they were confronted with this disease. So this is not just anybody, right? Let's look at what he had to say.
So I'll just give you quickly my experience. My team has directly treated successfully 6,000 patients. I've trained hundreds of physicians who are now training their students. And as a cumulative group, we've treated millions of patients successfully. President Trump was my patient. Rudy Giuliani was my patient. Reb Chaim Kanevsky has been my patient. Mr. Litzman, your health minister of Israel last year, was my patient. I'm just telling you which people have contacted me for care, including President Bolsonaro of Brazil. And then if you look at the high-risk population that has a 7.5% death rate, so my data, which was the first in the world, which I published in a peer-reviewed journal, which has become the basis of over 200 other studies, and that have corroborated my observations that if you treat people in the right time frame, you reduce death rate by 85%. So out of 600,000 Americans, we could have prevented 510,000 from going to the hospital and dying. And by the way, I presented this information to Bibi Netanyahu directly into his hands by way of a shliach in April of 2020. And I informed every single member of your Ministry of Health as well. My question to you is, if I can reduce the death rate from 7.5% to less than 0.5%, why would I use a poison death shot that doesn't work and has tremendous and horrific side effects? And I'll do one more mind experiment with you. If everyone on the planet were to get COVID and not get treated, the death rate globally will be less than 0.5%. Now, I'm not advocating for that. That's a lot of people. That's 35 million people would die. However, if we follow the advice of some of the quote unquote global leaders, let's say like Bill Gates said last year, 7 billion people need to be vaccinated, the death rate will be over 2 billion people. So wake up. This is World War III. This is a level of malfeasance and malevolence that we have not seen probably in the history of humanity.
So, Martin, what is your opinion on what Vladimir Zelenko just said?
It is horrific.
It is horrific,
It's horrific.
right? So, if you look at those statistics, then surely it is proper to look at the alternative, right?
And it's not far-fetched. What he does is he just applies the mathematics.
Correct. Now, as we said in the beginning, we are very convinced that this whole pandemic is very strongly related to the mark of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it is the right arm. It is not the mark, but it is the right arm of the beast. So the next thing that we need to introduce on top of it is some form of legislation that links the mark of the beast to this issue. We have to transition from a purely pandemic issue to an issue that will introduce the mark of the beast. And we have consistently said that the most probable way of doing that is by linking climate change to a health issue.
Yeah.
And if that occurs, then the next steps are, well
already thought out.
Well determined in prophecy, right? So let's have a look at what Joe Biden said at the United Nations.
A decade that will quite literally determine our futures. As a global community, we're challenged by urgent and looming crises, wherein lie enormous opportunities if we can summon the will and resolve to seize these opportunities. Will we work together to save lives, defeat COVID-19 everywhere, and take the necessary steps to prepare ourselves for the next pandemic, for there will be another one? Or will we fail to harness the tools at our disposal as the more virulent and dangerous variants take hold? Will we meet the threat of the challenging climate we're all feeling, already ravaging every part of our world with extreme weather? Or will we suffer the merciless march of ever-worsening droughts and floods, more intense fires and hurricanes, longer heat waves, and rising seas? Will we affirm and uphold the human dignity and human rights under which nations in common cause more than 7 decades ago formed this institution? Will we apply and strengthen the core tenets of the international system, including the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as we seek to shape the emergence of new technologies and deter new threats?
Well, he's definitely linking it to climate, right?
Definitely.
But it's also interesting that he's a prophet, because he has predicted that there will be new variants and that they will be more virulent.
And there will be another pandemic.
And there will be another pandemic.
But he's in good company, because Bill Gates also said that.
Correct. And Fauci also said the same thing. So there's one way in which you can be such a prolific prophet is if you already know what's going to happen, right? Yes. So let's see if we can link these two. September the 6th, 2021. 251 medical journals warned world leaders not to wait until COVID-19 is over to address the climate crisis, calling it the greatest threat to global public health. So is the climate crisis linked to public health?
Yes.
Like the arm is to the body?
Yep.
This is very interesting.
And what's interesting, it's more than a public threat to health than actually COVID, is what they're saying.
Correct. So the editors of the world's top medical journals have written a joint warning to world leaders saying that they must urgently focus on the climate crisis even before COVID-19 is under control. Well, they're going to start that in November, right, with the COP26. The article was released Sunday in 228 top journals worldwide and endorsed by a further 23. So there's a definite link between the climate and the health issue.
Yes.
It's like the arm to the body. You cannot separate them. Is there a definite link between the health message of the remnant to the third angel's message?
Yes.
You cannot sever the arm from the body, right? No. They are linked. So we have a counterfeit. Get ready, says the New York Post, for the left's climate change emergency lockdowns. They're calling this Code Red for the world. White House climate advisor Gina McCarthy adds that climate is now a health emergency. Is there a link?
There's the link.
There's the link between the right arm and the possible introduction of legislation.
Yes.
That will be brought through climate change, but which actually is the mark of the beast, right?
Yes. And would we see similar legislations that's happening now with the COVID crisis being enforced for climate crisis?
Absolutely, we can expect that. Now, again, the journal is important. Again, it's the journal Nature. As a recent Nature journal piece notes, COVID-19 lockdowns have prepared people for personal carbon allowances. So in other words, you can be restricted in your individual freedom that were unthinkable only a year before, have us more prepared to accept the tracking and limitations to achieve a safer climate. You will not be able to drive. That's a lockdown.
Correct. They've got certain islands like, for instance, Jamaica, have Sundays, no movement.
No movement on
Only on
Sundays. Okay, so that's very interesting. And of course, we have to get the young people on board. And Greta Thunberg is going to be very active, and she seems to have laid low lately. But she has just announced that there will be a strike return on Friday. This comes from the 21st of September 2021. So Fridays for Future Movement will be returning with another march on Friday the 24th of September to demand that world leaders take action on important climate issues. It comes as global leaders, including Prime Minister Boris Johnson, gather together in New York to discuss what they need to do to tackle important environmental problems. So again, the momentum is picking up. We are moving into a new phase.
Yes.
Something new is going to happen.
Definitely.
And can we unlink or unhinge the first one from this one?
No.
No, they've linked it already.
Correct. And like you mentioned earlier, can you unlink all of this from Bible prophecy?
No, you cannot unlink it.
So we're not going back to normal.
Are we conspiracy theorists now, or are we looking at facts?
We're looking at facts.
The BBC, 21st of September, climate change, COP26, a turning point for the world. The November COP26 summit on climate change is the moment when we have to grow up and take our responsibilities, the UK Prime Minister said. He said to a gathering in Glasgow, it would be a turning point for the world. Martin, that is prophetic language.
Correct. And he's not the only one that's been saying this.
So they've all been saying a turning point for the world. If we as a people do not understand that we are heading for the fulfillment of prophecy, we could miss the boat.
Correct. And it has to let your gears run. Do you want to affiliate with the state when enforcements are going to become prevalent?
I think we have to do a whole study. We have to do some prophetic brainstorming.
Yes.
We have to look at this from a prophetic angle because that is our position. But I want to appeal to our brethren that we stop demonizing each other and start realizing that we're at the point of prophetic fulfillment.
Correct.
It's time to wake up, stop slumbering. So, Martin, let's just go back in history a little bit to September 2009. That's a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Slow Sunday, the simple solution to global warming. Do you think they've canned that one and just put it into file 13 and not bring it up again? Well, if they're talking about reducing the carbon footprint just by restricting your movement, then not long ago, Sunday used to be a day of rest, a day of spiritual renewal, a day of families to come together. We can and should restore Sunday to a day for Gaia. The day for the earth. This is very interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting.
This brings something to mind. It covers again the whole spectrum. If you are either atheist, Buddhist, all religions can come together.
You need a common factor. So Climate Sunday is an opportunity for churches to act for creation. This comes now again from 2021. They haven't canned this idea.
No.
They are going to further it, and it comes from the World Council of Churches. We don't even have to read it all because we already know what it says. They want Climate Sunday.
Yes.
And Sunday is the mark of the beast.
Correct.
Because that will finally enforce an institution of the papacy, a child of the papacy, and violate our conscience once again. Nations Climate Sunday Service. This is also 2021. The Nations Climate Service, 1,950 churches and charities prepare for COP26. Martin, is this church and state working together?
Definitely.
Is this the image of the beast?
Yes.
Do you want to be part of the image of the beast?
I would seriously warn against being part of this.
What's going to happen to the image of the beast?
Destroyed.
Isn't it going to be thrown into the lake of fire?
Yes.
This is a very serious issue, Martin.
We are at Mount Carmel, where we
Yes.
have to decide.
Correct. So all of these churches are going to act on the climate change. Over 600 churches have signed the Now Declaration, joining around 150,000 signatories across the UK civil society, 9,248 churches involved in church greening schemes. And it's all dealing with COP26. COP26. Are we conspiracy theorists when we think that COP26 could be an important turning point in the history of this world?
No. Actually, we're quoting what the leaders of the world are saying.
But Martin, there's still so much time. Yeah. There could be still hundreds of years before the return of Jesus. Or are we missing the boat and demonizing each other?
I think if you are saying that Jesus is not coming for 100 years or whatever, then you are fearful and living with paranoia.
Yes, because you don't want him to come, because you're not ready for him to come. You don't want him to come. So COP26 is vital. This comes from the Church Times, September 2021. Multi-faith environment declaration tells world leaders. It's signed by 52 faith leaders from Scotland and across the UK. Earlier this month, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Pope Francis, and the Ecumenical Patriarch. So there you have 3 mega religions coming together, representing the Christianity in totality. You have the Archbishop of Canterbury supposedly representing the Protestants, but they're not Protestants because they keep the Mass and hold sacrifices when Jesus had one sacrifice for all. There's Pope Francis, the head of the beast system, and the Ecumenical Patriarch. So you have the Orthodox churches, you have the papacy, and you have the Protestant world combining their voices.
And in this document, this declaration, there were Buddhists, there were Islam, of all different faiths. It's an multi-faith document.
Correct. Now, what are these meaningful sacrifices that have to be undertaken for the sake of the earth? Restriction of movement and activity. So the work which the church has failed to do in a time of peace and prosperity, she will have to do in a terrible crisis. We read in the Spirit of Prophecy, Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5. Under the most discouraging, forbidden circumstances, the warnings that worldly conformity has silenced or withheld must be given under the fiercest oppositions from enemies of the faith.
We are there.
We are there. And at that time, the superficial conservative class, whose influence has steadily retarded the progress of the work, will renounce the faith and take their stand with the avowed enemies to whom their sympathies have long been tending. That is the most fearful statement.
Yes.
In other words, within our church, there are people whose sentiments have been tending to what the world has been saying. And they're using the same vocabulary.
Yes.
They are demonizing people and calling them conspiracy theorists or heretics, the modern version thereof. And they are moving in this direction as foretold here in the Spirit of Prophecy. Yes. These apostates will then manifest the most bitter enmity, doing all in their power to oppress and malign their former brethren and to excite indignation against them. Are we seeing it already, Martin?
It's a sad situation. Leaders threatening church members with handing them over to the authorities.
That is exactly what the Inquisition did. And this is something that we will have to seriously look at. We've received many, many letters saying, how is this possible? But unfortunately, it is a reality.
Yes.
This day is just before us. The members of the church will individually be tested and proved. That is why it is a personal choice. They will be placed in circumstances where they will be forced to bear witness for the truth. Many will be called to speak before council and in courts of justice, perhaps separately and alone. The experience which would have helped them in this emergency they have neglected to obtain, and their souls are burdened with remorse for wasted opportunities and neglected privileges. The Protestant world today sees in the little company keeping the Sabbath a Mordecai in the gate. His character and conduct, expressing reverence for the law of God, are a constant rebuke to those who have cast off the fear of the Lord and are trampling upon his Sabbath. The unwelcome intruder must by some means be put out of the way. If you can stick a label to him, you're an unvaccinated danger to humanity, then you have a plausible reason, even though it may not be based on the correct science, to get rid of him, right?
Correct.
Do we hear this sentiment already?
Yes.
And by the way, who's the most vociferous at the moment? Isn't it Joe Biden?
Correct.
Isn't it the image of the beast?
Yes. And does the beast say anything less?
Nothing less.
No.
So he's just reiterating, doing on his behalf the bidding of the beast.
And I would like to reiterate again, be careful if you stand on that side.
Satan will excite indignation against the humble minority who conscientiously refuse to accept popular customs and traditions. Men of position and reputation will join with the lawless and the vile to take counsel against the people of God. Wealth, genius, education will combine to cover them with contempt. Persecuting rulers, ministers, and church members will conspire against them. Martin, when I look at what is being said in the world, I can see this prophecy fulfilling before our eyes.
Yes, and then we've got that very sorrowful statement there. And church members will conspire against them.
Correct.
Church members will join the wealthy.
And how will they do it? How will they do it? They will do it by voice. They will do it by pen. They will do it by representations and angry appeals. Have we seen those?
We've been at the other end, the receiving end of that.
They will stir up the passions of the people. Not having a thus says the scripture to bring against the advocates of the Bible Sabbath, they will resort to oppressive enactments to supply the lack. To secure popularity and patronage, legislators will yield to the demand for a Sunday law. On this battlefield comes the last great conflict of the controversy between truth and error. Now, Martin, people have been waiting for this implementation of the mark of the beast and have separated everything else from it.
That's it. They think this is going to be a standalone event in the world history.
But what if it's linked to the right arm? If this is linked to the right arm, then you cannot separate it from the body.
And it has to be, because the right arm of the three angel message is also a health one.
Now, Martin, which component of your body can grab hold of the other one and throw him into prison or get rid of him?
The arm.
The arm. The arm. In the last great conflict of the controversy with Satan, those who are loyal to God will see every earthly support cut off. You won't be able to buy or sell. You won't be able to access your bank account, that man said.
That's it.
Interesting. Every earthly support cut off.
Yes. You know, the Bible says, and that's where a lot of people come to us and ask the question. But it says if you take the mark of the beast, then you cannot buy and sell. But it doesn't say that there won't be previously already implementations of no buying and selling.
Correct. Absolutely. Because they refuse to break his law in obedience to earthly powers, they will be forbidden to buy or sell. It will finally be decreed that they shall be put to death. If you are a danger, if you can be proven to be a danger, and I'm putting proven in very strong inverted commas. If you can be proven to be a danger to society and to the survival of society in terms of their health, that is another, in inverted commas, plausible reason to have you removed.
Yes, and that they are saying that those exact words already.
But now the obedient is given to the promise. He will dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munitions of the rocks. Bread will be given him. His water shall be sure. To that time of distress, the prophet Habakkuk looked forward, and his words express the faith of the church. Although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall the fruit be in the vines, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the fields shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. Habakkuk 3:17 and 18. Well, let's end with this statement. It comes from God's Remnant Church, the Remnant Church, page 6, paragraph 1. If in defiance of God's arrangements, the world be allowed to influence our decisions or our actions, the purpose of God is defeated. Let's just shake our heads and read that again.
Yeah.
If in defiance of God's arrangements, the world be allowed to influence our decisions or our actions, the purpose of God is defeated. However species the pretext, if the church waver here, there is written against her in the books of heaven a betrayal of the most sacred trusts and treachery to the kingdom of Christ. The church has no right to coerce you into taking a particular position or another position. It has no right. It has the right to give you the facts, but it has no right to coerce you. Because if in defiance of God's arrangement the world be allowed to influence your decision or your actions, the purpose of God will be defeated. This is a personal choice. This is a choice that every individual will have to make for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a choice that will also be brought to bear when the final test comes. Martin, we are practicing as we move along. This doesn't mean that if people have already made certain choices which they now might feel are wrong, that all is lost. Not at all. Because you cannot be held responsible for what you do not fully understand.
Correct.
So when it comes to the loud cry of the third angel's message, it must be very clear what the choice is. And no matter who stands up, no matter how high their position, to influence you to accept the mark of the beast, because the circumstances are not yet the final mark of the beast. And climate change is a very plausible way of doing that, saying this Sunday lockdown is nothing to do with the mark of the beast. This is just a climate issue.
Correct.
The real one will be a standalone religious issue.
Yeah.
Then you could just have fallen into the trap and be lost. So may God give us wisdom to make the right choices. Shall we pray?
Please.
Heavenly Father, we are living in such troublous times, such momentous times. Prophecy is fulfilling before our eyes, and we need solve. And Lord, please wake up your church and help us to stand in unity, because the wave that is coming towards us is going to affect us all, no matter how we have believed up to this point. Grant us the wisdom and grant us the courage to make choices that will lead to eternal life with you forever and ever and ever. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.